Commander Zephi of the Galactic Dominion stood before the massive holographic display, his four arms crossed in what his species considered a gesture of supreme confidence. The bridge of the dreadnought Eternal Supremacy hummed with activity as his crew prepared for what they believed would be the final chapter in galactic history. Status report, Zephi commanded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had conquered 17 star systems without a single defeat. All fleets are in position, Commander, reported his tactical officer, an insectoid Vextar whose compound eyes gleamed with anticipation. 2,000 ships surrounding the Sol system. The humans have nowhere to run. Zephi's mandibles clicked in amusement. Humans, the youngest species in known space, barely having achieved faster-than-light travel a mere century ago. When the Dominion scouts first encountered them, the reports were almost laughable. A species that had spent most of its recorded history fighting amongst itself, destroying their own planet's environment, and showing remarkable inefficiency in resource management. Show me their pathetic defenses again, Zephi ordered. The hologram shifted to display the Sol system. Earth hung in space like a small blue marble, protected by what could generously be called a modest fleet. Maybe 300 ships, mostly converted civilian vessels with hastily mounted weapons. Their technology was primitive by Dominion standards, still using chemical propulsion for many of their craft and relying on crude ballistic weapons. They call this a defense fleet, laughed Kethmore, the ship's weapons officer. My personal yacht has more firepower than their flagship. The crew erupted in chittering, clicking, and various sounds that passed for laughter among the diverse species of the Dominion. Zephi allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. This would indeed be the easiest conquest in Dominion history. The Galactic Dominion had spent 10,000 years expanding across the galaxy, absorbing or destroying every species they encountered. Their military doctrine was simple and effective, overwhelming force applied with surgical precision. They had perfected the art of conquest, studying each species for decades before striking, learning their weaknesses, exploiting their fears. Humanity had been observed for exactly 57 standard years. The conclusion was unanimous among Dominion strategists. Humans were weak, divided, and posed no threat to galactic order. Their only remarkable trait seemed to be their capacity for self-destruction, which would actually make the Dominion's job easier. Sir, the communications officer spoke up, we're receiving a transmission from the human flagship. Put it through, Zephi said, curious to hear what these primitives might have to say before their inevitable surrender. The hologram shimmered and resolved into the image of a human female. She appeared to be middle-aged by human standards, with graying hair pulled back severely and wearing what the Dominion recognized as a military uniform. Her eyes were steady, showing no fear despite facing certain death. I am Admiral Sarah Chun of the United Earth Defense Force, she said calmly. You are trespassing in sovereign human territory. I order you to withdraw immediately. The bridge erupted in laughter again. The sheer audacity of these creatures never ceased to amuse the Dominion forces. Zephi stepped forward, making sure his full imposing presence was visible on the transmission. At nearly 3 meters tall, with chitinous armor and glowing red eyes, he was specifically chosen for psychological warfare. I am Commander Zephi of the Galactic Dominion. Your species has been evaluated and found wanting. You will surrender unconditionally, and your people will be relocated to designated preservation worlds where you may continue to exist under Dominion oversight. Resistance is futile and will only result in unnecessary casualties. Admiral Chin's expression didn't change. I'm afraid that's unacceptable. Humanity will not surrender. Admiral, Zephi's voice took on a patronizing tone. You are facing 2,000 of the most advanced warships in the galaxy. Your entire fleet could be destroyed in less than 1 of your hours. Be reasonable. Commander, Chin replied. You clearly don't understand humans very well. We have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. We will not do nothing. Zephi's patience was wearing thin. He had offered mercy, which was more than most species received. Very well. You have 1 of your hours to reconsider. After that, we will begin the pacification of your system. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in relative silence. Stubborn creatures, muttered the tactical officer. Should we begin bombardment of their outer colonies to demonstrate our resolve? No, Zephi decided. Let them use their hour to contemplate the futility of resistance. It will make the final surrender more complete. What the Dominion forces didn't know was that Admiral Chun had spoken truly when she said they didn't understand humans. The observers had made a critical error in their assessment. They had watched human conflicts and seen inefficiency. They had observed human environmental damage and seen short-sightedness. They had noted human political divisions and seen weakness. They had completely missed the one trait that defined humanity above all others. When pushed to the brink, humans didn't break. They adapted. On Earth, in the massive underground command center buried beneath the Swiss Alps, Admiral Chun turned to face the assembled leaders of humanity. Representatives from every nation, every major corporation, every significant military force on the planet were present, either in person or via quantum communication. Well, she said simply, this is it. They want us to surrender. What are our chances? Asked General Morrison, the grizzled commander of North American Defense Forces. Against their technology and numbers? Chin paused. 0. In a conventional engagement, we lose. Badly. Then, what do you propose? This came from Director Nakamura of the Pan-Asian Collective. Chun smiled, and, for the first time since the crisis began, it wasn't a grim expression. We don't fight conventionally. She activated the room's main display, showing the tactical situation. The Dominion fleet was arranged in a perfect encirclement, textbook formation for a siege. They think they know us, Chin continued. They've watched us for decades, seen our wars, our mistakes, our failures. They think they understand human nature. Don't they? Asked President Martinez of the European Federation. They understand human nature in isolation, Chin replied. What they don't understand is human nature when we're united by a common threat. They've never seen what happens when humanity faces extinction. The room was silent as the implication sank in. They're expecting surrender or futile resistance, Chin went on. They're prepared for conventional warfare, for political negotiations, for the standard responses they've seen from other species. What they're not prepared for is what makes humans unique in this galaxy. Which is, prompted Admiral Volkov of the Russian Space Command. We cheat, Chin said simply. We don't play by the rules. We don't accept that something is impossible just because it's never been done before. We don't surrender just because the odds are against us. She began outlining humanity's response plan, codenamed Broken Arrow. It wasn't a military strategy in any conventional sense. It was something far more dangerous to an empire that had conquered through predictable patterns. It was human ingenuity unleashed without restraint. While the Dominion fleet maintained its perfect siege formation, certain that their overwhelming superiority would force a quick surrender, something was happening throughout the Sol system that their sensors couldn't detect. Human ships weren't retreating to defensive positions. They were scattering, using their inferior technology in ways the Dominion had never encountered. Civilian vessels were being rapidly converted not into weapons platforms, but into something else entirely. On Mars, the terraforming stations were being reconfigured for a purpose their designers had never imagined. In the asteroid belt, mining operations suddenly shifted to extracting very specific elements in quantities that made no tactical sense. And, on Earth, in laboratories and workshops across the planet, scientists and engineers were working with a desperate creativity that would have terrified the Dominion if they had understood what it meant. The hour was almost up when Zephi received an unexpected report. Sir, his science officer said hesitantly, we're detecting some unusual energy signatures throughout the system. Define unusual. The humans appear to be modifying their infrastructure, but not in any way that makes military sense. They're actually weakening their defensive positions. Zephi's confidence wavered slightly. In 10,000 years of galactic conquest, the Dominion had seen every possible response to their arrival. Surrender, futile resistance, attempted negotiation, even mass suicide rather than face subjugation. But they had never seen a species deliberately weaken their defenses while under siege. Perhaps they're preparing for surrender after all, suggested the tactical officer. But something in Zephi's genetic memory, some instinct honed by millennia of survival, whispered that something was wrong. The hour expired. Admiral Chin's image appeared on the Dominion flagship's screen once more. Have you reconsidered? Zephi asked. Yes, Chen replied calmly. We have. Excellent. Begin transmitting your surrender terms. Chen's smile was sharp as a blade. I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding, Commander. We haven't reconsidered surrender. We've reconsidered mercy. Before Zephi could respond, Admiral Chun delivered the words that would echo through galactic history. You wanted to see what humanity is capable of when threatened with extinction. Congratulations. You're about to find out. The transmission ended, leaving the Dominion bridge in stunned silence. It was then that the impossible began to happen. Throughout the Sol system, the modifications that human engineers had been frantically implementing activated simultaneously. What the Dominion had interpreted as weakening defenses revealed its true purpose. Humanity wasn't preparing to fight a space battle they couldn't win. They were preparing to change the rules of engagement entirely. The first sign that something had gone catastrophically wrong with Dominion intelligence was when their primitive, chemical rockets suddenly accelerated far beyond their design specifications. Ships that should have been limited to a fraction of light speed were suddenly moving at velocities that defied their known technology. Sir, the science officer's voice was tight with confusion. The human vessels are exceeding our projections by several orders of magnitude. This is impossible with their technology. Explain, Zephi demanded. They appear to have retrofitted their ships with drives that shouldn't exist. Our scans show massive energy outputs that their power systems cannot possibly generate. On the tactical display, human ships were moving in patterns that violated everything the Dominion knew about physics and space combat. They weren't trying to engage the superior Dominion forces directly. Instead, they were doing something that no other species in galactic history had ever attempted. They were turning the Sol system itself into a weapon. The modifications to Mars weren't defensive installations. They were components of a massive gravitational manipulation system that was using the planet's own mass as a focusing lens. The asteroid mining operations hadn't been gathering materials for weapons or defenses. They had been harvesting specific isotopes needed for something the Dominion's databases had no classification for. And the energy signatures from Earth weren't from desperate last-ditch weapons. They were from the activation of what could only be described as applied stellar engineering on a scale that should have taken centuries to complete, being implemented in real time by a species that had supposedly mastered spaceflight only 100 years ago. Commander, the tactical officer reported, his voice climbing toward panic. We're detecting massive gravitational anomalies throughout the system. It's as if the humans are somehow manipulating local spacetime. Zephi stared at the tactical display, watching formations of human ships move in ways that his species' physics said were impossible, while the very structure of the Sol system began to shift in patterns that suggested a level of technological capability that the Dominion's 57 years of observation had completely failed to detect. For the first time in his career, Commander Zephi of the Galactic Dominion felt something that no Dominion military leader had experienced in 10 millennia of conquest. Fear. And, in that moment, as the impossible became reality around him, Zephi began to understand that the Dominion had made a mistake that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. They had threatened humanity with extinction, and humanity had taken that as a challenge. Commander Zephi watched in growing horror as the tactical display showed what could only be described as the impossible becoming routine. Human vessels that should have been destroyed by the first Dominion salvo were not only surviving, but thriving in an environment that defied everything the galaxy's most advanced civilization understood about space warfare. Status report, he barked, his forearms gesturing frantically at the chaos unfolding around them. Sir, the science officer stammered. Our weapon systems they're not functioning as expected. The humans appear to have deployed some kind of field that's interfering with our targeting computers. Our plasma bolts are being deflected by what our sensors identify as nothing. Nothing doesn't deflect plasma, Zephi snarled. Yes, sir. That's the problem. The truth was far more unsettling than mere technological superiority. What the Dominion was witnessing was the first demonstration of humanity's greatest strength, their complete refusal to accept that something couldn't be done. While the Dominion had spent 10,000 years perfecting existing technologies, making them more efficient and more powerful, humanity had spent their brief spacefaring period asking a fundamentally different question. What if we're thinking about this all wrong? The gravitational manipulation that the Dominion sensors were detecting wasn't just advanced technology. It was the practical application of theories that human physicists had been developing for decades, theories that suggested the universe was far more malleable than anyone had previously imagined. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching as her life's work was put to the ultimate test. 20 years ago, her papers on quantum gravitational engineering had been dismissed by her peers as interesting but impractical. Today, those theories were being used to turn the moon itself into a massive lens that could focus and redirect energy on a scale that dwarfed anything the Dominion had ever encountered. Gravitational lens at optimal configuration, reported her assistant, Dr. James Park. We're ready to begin Phase 2. Initiate, Vasquez ordered. Throughout the Sol system, installations that the Dominion had dismissed as defensive positions revealed their true purpose. They weren't designed to stop an invasion. They were designed to trap one. The first Dominion ship to realize they were in serious trouble was the destroyer Merciless Victory. Its captain, a veteran of 43 successful planetary conquests, was monitoring the human resistance when his ship suddenly stopped responding to navigation commands. Engineering, report. Captain Crixtal demanded. Sir, we're caught in some kind of gravity well, but it's not natural. It's as if space itself has become thick. Crixtal looked at his tactical display and felt his blood run cold. The gravity well wasn't centered on any celestial body. It was centered on his ship. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had managed to create a localized gravitational field that was holding his destroyer in place like an insect in amber. And it wasn't just his ship. Throughout the Dominion fleet, vessels were finding themselves trapped in gravitational fields that appeared and disappeared seemingly at random, following no known laws of physics. This is impossible, Zepheim muttered, watching his perfectly organized fleet formation dissolve into chaos as ships found themselves unable to maneuver. Sir, his communications officer spoke up, we're receiving multiple distress calls from the fleet. Ships are reporting complete loss of navigation control. How many ships affected? 700 and counting. On Earth, Admiral Chun allowed herself a moment of satisfaction as she watched the Dominion fleet's formation collapse. The gravitational manipulation system was working exactly as theoretical models had predicted, but seeing it in practice was still breathtaking. Phase 1 complete, she announced to the command center. Begin Phase 2. If the Dominion thought gravitational manipulation was the extent of human ingenuity, they were about to receive a very unpleasant surprise. The asteroid belt, which Dominion scouts had dismissed as a collection of worthless rocks, suddenly came alive with activity. Thousands of mining platforms that had been harvesting specific isotopes for the past year activated systems that the Dominion's databases had no classification for. Dr. Sarah Kim watched from the command center of Ceres Station as her antimatter containment systems came online. For 3 years, her team had been developing methods for creating and storing antimatter in quantities that previous human technology had deemed impossible. The project had been classified beyond top secret, hidden even from most government officials. Antimatter production at maximum output, Kim reported to Earth Command. We're generating approximately 10,000 units per hour. On the Dominion flagship, the science officer's readings went from confusing to terrifying. Sir, we're detecting massive antimatter signatures throughout the asteroid belt. The humans appear to be producing it in industrial quantities. Zepheim felt his confidence crumble completely. Antimatter production on an industrial scale was something that only the most advanced Dominion facilities could achieve, and even then, the safety requirements made it prohibitively expensive for all but the most critical applications. How much? He asked, dreading the answer. Conservative estimate? They've produced more antimatter in the past hour than our entire fleet carries in its weapon systems. But antimatter production was only the beginning. As the Dominion fleet struggled with gravitational manipulation and tried to comprehend the implications of humanity's apparent mastery of matter-antimatter engineering, the third phase of the human response activated. Dr. Michael Chun, no relation to Admiral Chun, despite the shared surname, stood in the deep space laboratory that had been secretly constructed in the outer system over the past 5 years. His research into quantum field manipulation had been theoretical until 6 months ago, when the approaching Dominion threat had provided the motivation to turn theory into devastating reality. Quantum field generators online, he reported. Reality anchors stable. Begin field deployment, came the response from Earth Command. What happened next would be debated by galactic physicists for centuries to come. The space around the Dominion fleet began to exhibit properties that violated everything that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations thought they knew about the fundamental structure of reality. Ships found their weapons systems firing at targets that didn't exist. Communication systems received messages from vessels that scanners confirmed weren't there. Navigation computers reported that they were simultaneously in 17 different locations. "Sir," the Dominion tactical officer reported, his voice edging toward hysteria, "we're detecting quantum field fluctuations that are causing localized reality distortions. Our equipment is reporting impossible readings." "Define impossible," HFY demanded, though he was beginning to suspect he didn't want to know. "Sir, according to our sensors, this ship is currently existing in 11 different quantum states simultaneously. Our weapons are firing, not firing, and have never existed, all at the same time." Commander HFY, veteran of 10,000 years of galactic conquest, found himself facing an enemy that didn't just use advanced technology. They were using technology that redefined what technology could do. But the true horror of humanity's response wasn't in the individual components. It was in how they worked together. The gravitational manipulation wasn't just trapping ships. It was herding them into specific locations where the quantum field distortions were most effective. The antimatter production wasn't just creating weapons. It was fueling the power requirements for reality manipulation on a scale that should have required the energy output of a star. And all of it was being coordinated by human minds that approached problems in ways that 10,000 years of galactic civilization had never encountered. Admiral Chun watched the tactical display as Dominion ships found themselves caught in what could only be described as a carefully crafted pocket of altered reality. Ships that tried to retreat found themselves moving deeper into the trap. Weapons that fired at human targets hit other Dominion vessels instead. Communication systems that tried to coordinate a response broadcast surrender orders to their own fleets. "Status of the Dominion fleet?" she asked. "Approximately 40% are completely incapacitated by gravitational anchors," reported her tactical officer. "Another 30% are experiencing reality distortion effects that have rendered them combat ineffective. The remaining 30% are attempting to retreat, but the gravitational fields are preventing escape." "And our losses?" "Minimal. The reality anchors are protecting our ships from Dominion weapons. Any damage we've taken has been from equipment failures due to the extreme physics we're manipulating." On the Dominion flagship, HFY was beginning to understand that his species had made a catastrophic error in judgment. The humans weren't just resisting conquest. They were demonstrating technologies that made the Dominion's 10,000-year-old arsenal look primitive by comparison. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving another transmission from the human admiral." "Put her through," HFY said, hoping against hope that Admiral Chun was calling to discuss terms of surrender. His surrender? Admiral Chin's image appeared on the screen, but her expression had changed. Where before there had been determined defiance, now there was something far more unsettling. She looked almost disappointed. "Commander HFY," she began, "I want you to understand something. What you're experiencing right now, this isn't our military doing their best. This is our scientists getting their first real opportunity to test theories that they've been working on as side projects." HFY felt something that no Dominion commander had ever experienced, the certainty of absolute defeat. "Our actual military hasn't engaged yet," Chun continued. "What you're facing is our research division." The implications hit HFY like a physical blow. If this was what human scientists could accomplish when threatened, what would their actual military forces be capable of? "You have a choice, Commander," Admiral Chun said. "You can surrender now, and we'll consider this an unfortunate misunderstanding. Or you can continue this engagement and discover what happens when we stop being polite." For a long moment, HFY stared at the human admiral, trying to process what he was hearing. In 10,000 years of galactic conquest, the Dominion had never encountered a species that treated reality itself as something to be manipulated at will. What? What are you? He finally asked. Admiral Chen's smile was neither cruel nor kind. It was the expression of someone who had just realized that the rest of the galaxy had been playing a children's game while humanity had been preparing for war. "We're human," she said simply. "And you just made the mistake of threatening our existence." The transmission ended, leaving Commander Zephi alone with the dawning realization that the Galactic Dominion's age of unquestioned supremacy had just come to an abrupt end. The silence on the Dominion flagship's bridge was deafening. For the first time in 10,000 years of galactic conquest, a Dominion fleet faced the very real possibility of complete defeat. Commander Zephi stared at the tactical display, watching as more of his ships fell victim to technologies that shouldn't exist. "Sir," his science officer spoke up hesitantly, "I'm reading massive energy buildups throughout the human positions. Whatever they were doing before, they're preparing something much larger." Zephi's mandibles clicked nervously. "Larger how?" "The energy signatures are off our measurement scales. Whatever they're planning requires power outputs comparable to a small star." Before Zephi could respond, space around the Sol system began to change in ways that challenged the sanity of everyone watching. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood before the master control console of Project Lighthouse, humanity's most closely guarded secret. Hidden in the asteroid belt, disguised as a mining operation, the facility had been under construction for 15 years. Its purpose was so audacious that even most human scientists had dismissed it as impossible. "Stellar Engineering Array Online," Vasquez reported to Admiral Chen. "We're ready to begin star lifting operations." "Approved," came Chen's immediate response. "Show them what humans do when we're really motivated." What happened next would be remembered as the moment that humanity announced itself as the new dominant force in galactic affairs. The sun, that yellow star that had warmed Earth for billions of years, began to behave in ways that violated every known principle of stellar physics. Solar flares erupted in perfect geometric patterns, each one precisely controlled and directed. The star's magnetic field shifted and reformed under humanity's guidance, creating structures that channeled stellar energy with impossible efficiency. Commander Zephi watched his instruments register energy outputs that his ship's computers couldn't even process. The humans weren't just manipulating matter and space. They were controlling a star. "This is impossible," he whispered. "Stellar engineering on this scale should require the resources of an entire galactic civilization." "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice tight with fear, "the humans are using the star itself as a weapon. They're directing solar output through those gravitational lenses they created." On the tactical display, beams of concentrated stellar energy began to lance across the Sol system with surgical precision. But they weren't aimed at Dominion ships. Instead, they were carving through space itself, creating corridors of superheated plasma that formed a complex three-dimensional maze around the trapped fleet. Admiral Chen watched the display with grim satisfaction. The stellar engineering project had been humanity's backup plan in case they ever faced a threat they couldn't handle through conventional means. The approaching Dominion fleet had provided the perfect test case. "Phase 3 complete," she announced to her command staff. "The Dominion fleet is now completely contained within a stellar plasma labyrinth. Any attempt to escape will result in their ships being vaporized." "What about their surrender, Admiral?" asked General Morrison. Chen's expression hardened. "They had their chance to surrender. Now they get to see what happens when humans decide to solve a problem permanently." But even the stellar manipulation was only part of humanity's response. While the Dominion fleet struggled to comprehend the implications of controlled star lifting, the fourth phase of the human plan activated. Dr. Marcus Webb stood in the command center of Titan Station, watching as the massive particle accelerators built into Saturn's largest moon came online. For 8 years, his team had been secretly constructing what was essentially a planet-sized physics experiment, disguised as atmospheric research facilities. "Dimensional fold generators at full power," Webb reported. "We're ready to initiate space-time manipulation on a macro scale." "You're authorized to proceed," Admiral Chen responded. "Let's show our guests what happens when humans get creative with physics." The space around Saturn began to fold in on itself, creating pockets of altered reality that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Dominion sensors went haywire as they tried to process readings that suggested Saturn and its moons were simultaneously present in normal space and somewhere else entirely. But the true purpose of the dimensional manipulation wasn't to confuse enemy sensors. It was to provide humanity with access to resources and space that existed outside the normal constraints of three-dimensional reality. Commander HFY received reports from his science teams that grew increasingly frantic with each update. Sir, the humans appear to have created stable dimensional pockets that are larger inside than outside. They're extracting resources from parallel realities and manufacturing weapons that exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. What kind of weapons? HFY asked, though he was beginning to suspect that he didn't want to know. Weapons that can hit targets that are in different dimensional phases, sir. Our shields and armor are designed for three-dimensional threats. These weapons are attacking us from directions that don't exist. The tactical display showed Dominion ships being disabled by weapons fire that seemed to come from empty space. Defensive systems couldn't target threats that existed partially outside normal reality. Armor plating designed to stop the most powerful conventional weapons proved useless against attacks that bypassed three-dimensional space entirely. But even this wasn't the full extent of humanity's preparations. Deep in Earth's oceans, in facilities hidden beneath miles of water and rock, Dr. Lisa Park initiated the final phase of humanity's response to galactic threats. Project Prometheus had been classified at levels that didn't officially exist, its research conducted by scientists who had been sworn to secrecy under penalty of charges that would make them disappear from history. Temporal Manipulation Array Online. Park reported through heavily encrypted channels. We have achieved stable, localized time distortion. Admiral Chun felt a chill despite the warmth of the command center. Temporal manipulation was humanity's ultimate weapon, the one technology that even she had hoped they would never need to use. Status of the test field? Chun asked. Stable and contained. We've successfully created a pocket of accelerated time around the lunar far side. What happens in that field in 1 second translates to approximately 1 hour of normal time. And production capabilities? We can manufacture a complete battle fleet in what the outside universe experiences as minutes. The ships will have experienced months of construction time within the temporal field. Chun closed her eyes briefly, considering the implications. Humanity had developed technology that allowed them to manufacture military assets faster than any enemy could possibly respond. It was the ultimate force multiplier, and it meant that any prolonged engagement with humanity would become increasingly one-sided as humans produced more and more advanced weapons while their enemies struggled with supply lines that operated in normal time. Commander HFY was reviewing damage reports from his fleet when his communications officer delivered news that broke what remained of his confidence. Sir, we're detecting massive industrial activity throughout the Sol system, but the energy signatures suggest the construction is happening at impossible speeds. It's as if the humans are building entire fleets in minutes. How many ships? HFY asked mechanically. Conservative estimate, sir. They've produced more vessels in the past 10 minutes than our entire invasion force. HFY stared at the tactical display as new human ship signatures appeared with each sensor sweep. Ships that registered as having been constructed weeks or months ago but had somehow materialized in the past few minutes. Ships with technology signatures that were advancing in real time, becoming more sophisticated with each passing moment. The Dominion fleet was facing an enemy that could outproduce them at rates that defied comprehension. Sir, the science officer reported, I'm also detecting what appears to be controlled temporal distortion. The humans seem to have developed localized time manipulation technology, meaning they can make time move faster or slower in specific areas, sir. They could potentially experience weeks of preparation time, while only minutes pass for us. Commander HFY finally understood the true scope of humanity's capabilities. They weren't just technologically advanced. They had developed technologies that fundamentally altered the rules of engagement in ways that made traditional military doctrine irrelevant. The Galactic Dominion strategy had always been to use overwhelming force and superior technology to achieve quick victories. But humans had developed countermeasures that didn't just neutralize Dominion advantages. They reversed them completely. Where the Dominion relied on superior numbers, humans had developed temporal manipulation that let them outproduce any enemy. Where the Dominion used advanced technology, humans had developed reality manipulation that made conventional physics irrelevant. Where the Dominion depended on proven tactics, humans had rewritten the fundamental rules of space warfare. Admiral Chen's image appeared on the Dominion flagship's main screen one final time. "Commander Zeph-Hai," she began, "I want to make sure you understand your situation completely. Your fleet is trapped in a stellar plasma maze that will vaporize any ship that tries to leave. Your weapons are useless against targets that exist in multiple dimensions. Your communications are being intercepted and redirected by quantum field manipulation. Your navigation systems are compromised by gravitational anchors that can be activated anywhere in the system." Zeph-Hai said nothing, waiting for the final blow. "More importantly," Chen continued, "while we've been talking, my scientists have used temporal manipulation to design and build weapons that are approximately 50 years more advanced than anything your fleet is equipped to handle. We now have the capability to destroy your entire force without risking a single human life. What do you want?" Zeph-Hai finally asked. Admiral Chen's expression remained professionally neutral, but there was steel in her voice. "I want you to go back to your Dominion and deliver a message. Humanity is no longer available for conquest. Any future attempts to threaten our species will be met with responses that escalate until the threat is permanently eliminated. And if the Dominion chooses to accept this, then we'll pretend this entire incident never happened. Your fleet will be escorted out of our system, your damaged ships will be repaired, and you'll be given safe passage to Dominion space." Zeph-Hai considered his options. He could continue the engagement and watch his entire fleet be systematically destroyed by technologies that his species couldn't comprehend, let alone counter. Or he could accept defeat and return to Dominion space with news that would reshape galactic politics. "I accept your terms," he said finally. Admiral Chen nodded. "Wise choice, Commander. But understand this. Humanity remembers. If the Dominion ever threatens us again, there won't be an opportunity for surrender." As the stellar plasma maze began to dissipate and the gravitational anchors released their grip on Dominion ships, Commander Zeph-Hai began to compose the report that would inform the Galactic Dominion that their age of unquestioned supremacy was over. A new power had risen in the galaxy, one that didn't just challenge Dominion authority, one that made Dominion authority irrelevant. The Great Assembly of the Galactic Dominion had never experienced anything like the emergency session that convened 7 days after the Sol incident. Representatives from 200 conquered species filled the massive amphitheater carved into the heart of Dominion Prime, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, chirps, growls, and electronic tones that the universal translators struggled to process. At the center of it all stood Commander Zeph-Hai, no longer the confident conqueror who had led the fleet to Sol. His 4 arms hung at his sides, his red eyes dim with the weight of what he had to report. "The floor recognizes Commander Zeph-Hai," announced Supreme Overlord Tichran, his voice cutting through the assembly's noise like a blade. "Present your report on the pacification of the Sol system." Zeph-Hai activated the holographic display, showing the assembled representatives the tactical layout of his fleet's approach to the human home system. Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly as they saw the overwhelming force that had been deployed. Initial engagement proceeded according to standard Dominion doctrine. Zeph-Hai began, his voice steady despite the humiliation he was about to endure. 2,000 vessels of the line, with full support infrastructure. The target species showed the expected defensive posture with primitive technology and limited numbers. More approving sounds from the assembly. This was the pattern they had seen for 10,000 years. However, Zeph-Hai continued, and the assembly fell silent at the tone in his voice. The intelligence reports on human capabilities were incomplete. Supreme Overlord Tichran's massive form leaned forward on his command throne. "Define incomplete." Zeph-Hai touched a control, and the holographic display changed to show the beginning of the human response. Even as a recording, the sight of human ships moving in impossible ways drew gasps from the assembly. The humans demonstrated technologies that our databases had no classification for, Zeph-Hai explained. gravitational manipulation on a scale that allowed them to trap our ships in localized space distortions, industrial antimatter production that exceeded our fleet's entire weapons capacity, quantum field manipulation that caused localized reality distortions. The assembly erupted into confused chatter. Supreme Overlord Teachran raised one massive hand, and silence fell instantly. Continue your report. Zephai's next words would be remembered as the moment that the Galactic Dominion realized they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy. The humans used our star as a weapon. They demonstrated controlled stellar engineering, directing solar output through gravitational lenses to create a containment field around our entire fleet. Dead silence filled the amphitheater. In 10,000 years of galactic conquest, no species had ever demonstrated the ability to manipulate stellar bodies as weapons. Furthermore, Zephai continued, his voice growing quieter. They showed evidence of dimensional manipulation, accessing resources from parallel realities, and temporal distortion, allowing them to accelerate production and development beyond any known parameters. Ambassador Crixnet of the Vextar Collective rose from her position in the assembly. Commander, are you suggesting that a single species, observed for less than a century, had developed technologies that surpass 10 millennia of Dominion advancement? I'm not suggesting it, Ambassador, Zephai replied grimly. I'm reporting it as observed fact. The holographic display showed the final moments of the engagement, with Dominion ships trapped helplessly while human vessels moved through space as if the laws of physics were merely suggestions to be ignored. What were our losses? Asked General Mordak of the Dominion Military Council. 0 ships destroyed, Zephai reported. The humans chose to demonstrate their capability rather than exercise it. Had they wished to destroy our fleet, our sensor data indicates they could have done so without significant effort. Supreme Overlord Titran was silent for a long moment, processing the implications of what he was hearing. You are telling this assembly that humanity allowed your fleet to survive? Yes, Supreme Overlord. Admiral Chun made it clear that they were demonstrating rather than attacking. She indicated that what we experienced was their research division testing experimental technologies, not their military at full readiness. The implications of that statement rippled through the assembly like a shockwave. If humanity's research division could neutralize the galaxy's most powerful fleet, what could their actual military accomplish? Ambassador Thek of the Silicon Consortium spoke up. What demands did they make for your fleet's release? None, Zephai answered. They repaired our damaged vessels, provided safe passage to the edge of their system, and requested only that we deliver a message to the Dominion, which was that humanity is no longer available for conquest, and that future threats will be met with escalating responses until the threat is permanently eliminated. The assembly fell silent again as the representatives contemplated what they had heard. Supreme Overlord Titran finally spoke. Commander, in your professional assessment, what would be the outcome of a full-scale Dominion assault on the Sol system? Zephai's response was immediate and unequivocal. Total defeat, Supreme Overlord. Based on the technologies they demonstrated, humanity could neutralize our entire military force without suffering significant casualties. The political ramifications hit the assembly immediately. For 10,000 years, the Galactic Dominion had maintained control through the certainty of military superiority. Every species they encountered was either absorbed into the Dominion or destroyed. The mere threat of Dominion intervention was usually sufficient to maintain order across 200 star systems. But now, for the first time in their history, they faced a species that was not only immune to Dominion military pressure, but could potentially reverse it. Ambassador Veltar of the Aquatic Alliance rose to address the assembly. What do we know about human expansion intentions? Unknown, Supreme Overlord Teachran admitted. Our intelligence networks in their region have gone dark. We must assume that humanity is aware of our surveillance capabilities and has taken countermeasures. What the Dominion didn't know was that humanity's response to their threat had gone far beyond simply defending the Sol system. The demonstration against Zephai's fleet had been as much a message to other galactic civilizations as it had been a warning to the Dominion. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in the command center of humanity's first extrasolar installation, hidden in the Proxima Centauri system. Around her, teams of scientists and engineers worked frantically to establish what Admiral Chun had designated as humanity's galactic insurance policy. Status report on the Stellar Engineering Network. Vasquez asked her team leader. Phase 1 installations are complete in 12 systems. Dr. Park replied. We have functional stellar manipulation capability across a sphere of influence encompassing 47 star systems. And the dimensional research stations? Operational in 6 locations. We're successfully accessing resources from 17 parallel realities, with production capabilities expanding exponentially. Vasquez nodded, satisfied with the progress. Humanity had learned a crucial lesson from their encounter with the Dominion. The galaxy was not a safe place for species that couldn't defend themselves. But, rather than simply building defenses, humans had characteristically chosen to redefine the entire concept of galactic security. Begin Phase 2 deployment, she ordered. I want temporal manipulation facilities operational in every system within 50 light-years of Earth within 6 months. That's an aggressive timeline, Park observed. The Dominion isn't our only potential threat, Vasquez replied. Our stellar manipulation at Sol was visible to anyone with sufficiently advanced sensors. We've announced our presence to every major galactic civilization. Some of them might see us as a threat to be eliminated before we become too powerful. What Vasquez didn't mention was that humanity's rapid expansion wasn't purely defensive. Human scouts had been exploring the galaxy for months, cataloging civilizations, analyzing threats, and identifying opportunities. What they had found was a galaxy dominated by conservative thinking and technological stagnation. Most species, once they achieved stable interstellar travel, seemed content to maintain the status quo. Even the Dominion, for all their military might, had spent 10 millennia perfecting existing technologies rather than developing revolutionary new approaches. Humanity, by contrast, treated every scientific discovery as a stepping stone to something even more audacious. Admiral Chun reviewed the intelligence reports from human scout fleets with growing amazement. The galaxy contained thousands of intelligent species, dozens of major civilizations, and resources beyond imagination. Yet virtually all of them seemed locked into patterns of thinking that limited their potential. Analysis of galactic technological development patterns, she requested from her AI assistant. Comprehensive review indicates that most civilizations plateau at approximately 40% of theoretical technological potential, the AI responded. Contributing factors include risk aversion, resource management conservatism, and adherence to established paradigms. And humanity's current development rate? Acceleration continues. Current estimates suggest humanity will exceed the theoretical maximum technological potential of most species within 18 months. Chun smiled grimly. Humanity wasn't just defending themselves from galactic threats. They were positioning themselves to reshape galactic civilization entirely. Initiate contact protocols with non-Dominion civilizations, she ordered. It's time to introduce ourselves to our neighbors. Back on Dominion Prime, Supreme Overlord Teachran faced the most significant challenge to Dominion authority in 10,000 years. The emergence of humanity had created a power vacuum that threatened the stability of galactic politics. Options, he asked his council of advisors. We could attempt diplomatic contact, suggested Chancellor Morgeth. Propose mutual non-aggression or even alliance. With a species that demonstrated they could destroy our entire fleet. General Mordak objected. That would be seen as a sign of weakness by every species under Dominion control. The alternative, Chancellor Morgeth replied, is to risk a war that we cannot win. Supreme Overlord Thran considered both options, neither of which appealed to him. Diplomacy with humanity would essentially acknowledge that the Dominion had met its match, undermining the fear-based control that maintained their empire. But continued aggression could result in the complete destruction of Dominion military forces. There is a third option, he said finally. We evacuate all Dominion assets from human space and establish a buffer zone. No Dominion vessels approach human territory, and we monitor their expansion from a safe distance. That's essentially surrendering an entire sector of the galaxy, General Mordak pointed out. Better to surrender territory than to lose our entire civilization, Teachran replied. Humanity has demonstrated that they can neutralize our military advantage. Until we understand their technology better, discretion is the better part of valor. The decision to avoid further contact with humanity was unanimous, but it came too late. Even as the Dominion Council debated their options, human scout ships were making contact with Dominion client species throughout the galaxy. The message they delivered was simple and revolutionary. The Galactic Dominion was no longer invincible. Humanity had proven that advanced technology and innovative thinking could neutralize 10,000 years of military superiority. For species that had lived under Dominion rule for millennia, the news was electrifying. Within weeks of the Sol incident, rebellions erupted in 12 Dominion client systems. The rebels didn't expect to defeat Dominion forces through conventional warfare. Instead, they requested technological assistance from humanity. Admiral Chun approved the first technology transfer with careful consideration of its implications. "We're not just changing the balance of power in local space," she told her staff. "We're potentially reshaping galactic civilization." "Is that our responsibility?" asked General Morrison. Chin's answer would define humanity's role in galactic affairs for generations to come. "It became our responsibility the moment the Dominion decided we were a threat to be eliminated. They forced us to develop the capability to defend ourselves. Now that we have that capability, we have a choice. Use it to protect only ourselves, or use it to create a galaxy where no species has to face the threat of extinction for the crime of existing." The choice was made. Humanity would not simply defend themselves against galactic threats. They would eliminate the source of those threats entirely. 1 year after the Sol incident, the galaxy was unrecognizable. Admiral Sarah Chun stood on the observation deck of humanity's newest achievement, the Prometheus Station, a massive installation that existed simultaneously in 12 dimensions and could manipulate time, space, and reality within a sphere of influence encompassing 200 star systems. Around her, beings from dozens of species worked together on projects that would have been considered impossible just months before. "Status report on the liberation operations?" Chen asked her aide, Captain Rodriguez. "Sector 7 is complete, Admiral. The last Dominion garrison surrendered this morning. That brings us to 43 systems liberated, with minimal casualties on either side." Chen nodded, satisfied but not surprised. Humanity's approach to galactic liberation had been as unconventional as everything else they did. Rather than engaging in massive fleet battles, they simply made Dominion military presence irrelevant. Ships equipped with dimensional manipulation technology could appear anywhere in a system without using conventional FTL travel. Weapons that existed in multiple realities simultaneously could strike targets while remaining untouchable themselves. Most dramatically, temporal manipulation allowed human forces to experience weeks of tactical planning and preparation while only minutes passed in normal space. The result was that Dominion forces found themselves facing enemies who had effectively infinite time to prepare perfect strategies for each engagement. But technology was only part of humanity's success. The real revolution was philosophical. Dr. Elena Vasquez entered the observation lounge, carrying a data tablet that displayed the latest reports from human research teams spread across the galaxy. "The results are even better than we hoped," she announced. "When we share our basic technological principles with other species, they don't just copy our devices. They innovate in ways we never considered." "Examples?" Chen asked. "The Vextar used our quantum manipulation techniques to develop biology that exists in multiple states simultaneously. They can now adapt to any environment instantly. The Aquatic Alliance combined our stellar engineering with their natural affinity for fluid dynamics to create space-time currents that allow faster-than-light travel without the energy requirements of conventional FTL." Chen reviewed the data with growing amazement. Humanity's gift to the galaxy wasn't just advanced technology. It was the concept that technology could be revolutionary rather than merely incremental. "What about the Dominion response?" she asked. Captain Rodriguez pulled up the latest intelligence reports. "They've withdrawn to their course systems and declared a state of emergency. Supreme Overlord Thran has been replaced by a military council that's focused entirely on defensive preparations." "And their client species?" 87% have either declared independence or requested human protection. The remaining 13% are in systems too distant for us to reach effectively. Chen studied the tactical display showing the current state of galactic politics. Where once the Dominion had controlled 200 systems through fear and overwhelming force, they now held fewer than 30, and those only because they were so heavily fortified that liberation would require more resources than humanity was willing to expend. Admiral, Dr. Vasquez said quietly, there's something else you should know. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected signals from beyond the galactic rim. We're not alone in the universe. Chun felt a chill despite the warmth of the observation lounge. Other galaxies? Confirmed. The signals suggest at least 3 separate galactic civilizations, each potentially more advanced than anything we've encountered in the Milky Way. The implications were staggering. Just as humanity was establishing themselves as the dominant force in their galaxy, they faced the possibility of threats from civilizations with millions of years more development time. Timeline for contact? Chen asked. Unknown, but the signals suggest they're aware of recent events in our galaxy. The energy signatures from our stellar manipulation at Sol were detectable from intergalactic distances. Chen considered this development. Humanity had spent the past year learning that they could reshape galactic civilization when threatened. Now they faced the possibility of threats that could make the Dominion look like a minor inconvenience. Double the research budget for Project Infinity, she ordered. If there are hostile civilizations beyond our galaxy, I want us to be ready. Project Infinity represented humanity's ultimate contingency plan, technology that could manipulate the fundamental constants of reality itself. Where their current capabilities allowed them to bend the laws of physics, Project Infinity would allow them to rewrite those laws entirely. 3 months later, the first contact with an extragalactic civilization came not as an invasion, but as a diplomatic mission. The ship that entered the Milky Way was unlike anything in human databases. Roughly spherical and approximately the size of Earth's moon, it seemed to be constructed from materials that existed in several dimensions simultaneously while generating energy signatures that suggested the controlled manipulation of black holes. Admiral Chun received the alien delegation aboard Prometheus Station in a conference room that had been specially modified to accommodate beings who existed in 12 dimensions. The leader of the delegation introduced itself as Archon Zeptath of the Andromeda Collaborative, a civilization that spanned 3 galaxies and included over 10,000 species. We come to investigate the recent disturbance in your galaxy. Zeptath communicated through patterns of reality distortion that humanity's translation systems could barely interpret. Our monitoring stations detected technologies that should not exist, such as, Chen asked carefully, controlled stellar manipulation by a species less than 1 million years old, dimensional engineering by beings who achieved spaceflight less than 2 centuries ago, temporal manipulation by creatures who have existed as a technological species for mere millennia. Admiral Chen realized that humanity was about to face their greatest test yet. The Andromeda Collaborative wasn't hostile, but they were clearly investigating whether humanity represented a threat to intergalactic stability. We developed those technologies in response to threats against our species, Chen explained. We have no aggressive intentions toward other civilizations. Yet you have systematically dismantled the dominant military power in your galaxy, Zeptath observed. The Galactic Dominion maintained stability for 10,000 years. Your actions have created a power vacuum. The Dominion maintained stability through oppression and the threat of genocide, Chen replied. We eliminated that threat. And replaced it with what? Chen activated a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy. Instead of a monolithic empire ruled by fear, the display showed a complex network of independent civilizations connected by mutual cooperation and shared technological advancement. We replaced oppression with opportunity, she said. Every species in the galaxy now has access to technologies that can improve their quality of life and expand their potential. Instead of one dominant species controlling everyone else, we have dozens of species contributing to galactic development. Zeptath studied the display for several minutes before responding. This is unprecedented. In our experience across 3 galaxies, emerging species typically follow one of 2 patterns. They either become conquerors like your Dominion, or they become isolationists who avoid contact with other civilizations. What pattern do we represent? You appear to be attempting something that has never been successfully achieved. A galactic civilization based on voluntary cooperation rather than enforced submission. Admiral Chun felt a surge of pride mixed with apprehension. Humanity hadn't just challenged galactic politics. They had attempted something that even intergalactic civilizations considered impossible. Will the collaborative interfere with our experiment? She asked. That depends on whether you can make it work, Zeptath replied. If your approach to galactic civilization proves successful, it could serve as a model for other galaxies. If it fails and creates chaos that spreads beyond your galaxy, we will be forced to intervene. The message was clear. Humanity was on probation. They had permission to continue their reshaping of galactic civilization, but they would be watched by beings whose power dwarfed anything humanity could currently imagine. After the Andromedan delegation departed, Admiral Chun called an emergency meeting of humanity's leadership council. We've bought ourselves time, she told the assembled leaders, but we're now facing expectations that go beyond anything we originally planned. We're not just responsible for human survival anymore. We're responsible for proving that an entire galaxy can function without oppression. Can it? Asked General Morrison. Chun looked around the table at representatives of humanity's greatest minds. Scientists who had rewritten the laws of physics. Engineers who had learned to manipulate the fundamental structure of reality. Military leaders who had defeated an empire that had seemed invincible. 6 months ago, I would have said it was impossible, she admitted. But 6 months ago, I also thought it was impossible for humanity to defend itself against the galactic dominion. She activated the room's display system, showing real-time data from across the galaxy. Hundreds of species working together on projects that combined their unique capabilities. Technologies being developed that no single species could have created alone. Art, music, and literature being shared across civilizations that have been isolated for millennia. We've already done the impossible, Chin continued. We've created a galaxy where species cooperate instead of competing for dominance. We've proven that advanced technology can be used to elevate everyone instead of just those who develop it first. What about the Dominion? Asked Dr. Vasquez. They're still out there, still representing the old way of thinking. Chin smiled grimly. The Dominion is welcome to join galactic civilization anytime they choose to abandon their philosophy of conquest. Until then, they can serve as a reminder of what the galaxy was like before humanity introduced a better way. 2 years later, Admiral Chun received a transmission that would mark the final victory in humanity's transformation of galactic civilization. The message came from Supreme Overlord Tichran's successor, High Commander Velkoth of what remained of the Galactic Dominion. Admiral Chun, the transmission began, I am contacting you to request formal entry into what our intelligence reports indicate you call the Galactic Cooperative. Chun allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before responding. The Dominion's request wasn't motivated by altruism. Their isolated systems had fallen behind the rapid technological advancement occurring throughout the rest of the galaxy. Species that had been Dominion clients just 2 years ago were now developing technologies that the Dominion couldn't match. What changed your mind, High Commander? Chin asked. Reality, Velkoth replied simply. We can continue to exist as an isolated remnant of an obsolete political system, or we can join the civilization that has replaced us. Membership in the cooperative requires acceptance of certain principles, Chin warned. No member species may threaten or coerce any other member. All technological developments must be shared freely. Disputes are resolved through negotiation rather than force. We understand, and the Galactic Dominion had made what they considered a simple calculation, threaten a weak species with extinction, and they would surrender. They had never encountered a species that responded to threats by redefining what was possible. But, perhaps most importantly, humanity had proven that strength didn't have to mean domination. They had become the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Then, used that power to ensure that every other species could reach their full potential as well. In the end, the Dominion's ultimate error wasn't underestimating human technology or human military capability. Their ultimate error was underestimating human character. They had expected humanity to react like every other species they had conquered, with fear, desperation, and eventual surrender. Instead, humanity had reacted like humans, with determination, creativity, and an absolute refusal to accept that anything was impossible. The galaxy would never be the same. And, throughout the cosmos, other civilizations were learning that there was a new answer to the question of what happened when an unstoppable force met an immovable object. The answer was, you get humans. Admiral Chin stood once again on the observation deck of Prometheus Station, but now she wasn't looking at reports of liberation operations or technological breakthroughs. She was watching as ships from hundreds of species worked together on humanity's newest project, the construction of a gateway to the Andromeda Galaxy. If there were civilizations out there that still believed in conquest and oppression, they would soon learn what the Galactic Dominion had discovered too late. Humanity was no longer confined to a single star system or even a single galaxy. They were expanding into the universe itself, carrying with them the revolutionary concept that civilizations could choose cooperation over conquest, growth over dominance, and hope over fear. The ultimate error had been corrected, and the universe was about to become a much more interesting place.